Giles Brown.
Let's talk.
I have been looking forward to doing this interview pretty much all week because it is one of the most fascinating and brilliant stories ever. The Gestapo's Most Wanted, The White Mouse, the life of SOE Agent Nancy Wake. Honestly, I know this story, parts of this story, but I'm about to find out even more. And Ali Sharman joins me to talk all about it. Ali, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Just explain a little bit about how eminently qualified you are to write about this brilliant woman.
Well, I came across her when I was working on some research for my PhD. And it was just, as you said, it's just kind of such an interesting story, isn't it? And it's perhaps a story that people know some parts of her life or have heard, parts of what she's done. But when I started looking into her and started thinking about who she was before those more famous exploits, that's when her story kind of really came alive for me. And when I felt really kind of intrigued by her character as well as just those incidents that some people may have heard of.
Because when we think about sort of SOE or the world of women in the Second World War, and we're completely wrong because, hey, that's male history for you, but we either think of gals at Bletchley Park doing their bit, or we think about, RAF, women pushing the maps across in the Battle of Britain, or we think Carve Her Name with Pride, obviously the very sad story of those SOE agents who are killed. But we don't think about people who, but it seems to be like an almost passive role. And if there's one thing that Nancy Wake wasn't, was shy and retiring, was it? Let's face it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, by the end of the war, she's manoeuvred herself into a position where she's the de facto leader of 25,000 Maquis troops. And it's something that just didn't happen at that time. You mentioned about, the male history, the male reworking of it. It's also just the way that they were assigned roles. And there were SOE agents who were female, who were behind enemy lines. But there's something quite special about the way that Nancy interacted with people and found herself like at the top of this group. And it's kind of interesting because people have asked her in interviews, so they asked her later in life, journalists asked her were you doing the cooking? Were you expected to do that? And her scathing responses were incredible because, she just was not taking on that role at all. She was having this militaristic, strategistic leadership role that would have been totally unheard of in any other way for any other person at that time.
Right, so she takes no proverbial. She's go-getting.
Yeah.
It comes as little surprise then that she's actually Australian.
Well, she was born in New Zealand.
Right.
She was born in New Zealand, yes.
Damn, that's
but she lived there.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, dear. Okay, that's me done then, right.
But she lived there for such a short amount of time.
Okay.
She was less than 2. She was a toddler when her whole family relocated to Australia. And she never really kind of saw herself as a New Zealander. She very much saw herself as having those Australian roots. After the war, she moved back to Australia to try her hand at politics there. So, she did very much feel that was the country of her birth, although she became French in many, many ways, and she saw France as her homeland during the majority of her life.
So how does she end up? Because obviously she doesn't unleash herself on the bleeding Nazis, So what's her, as Americans say, what's her journey? She's obviously going to speak French. How does she get to Europe? Why is she taking interest in this rather than just sitting back? And what's her background? Is it suburban? Is she rich? Is she poor? Is she a socialite? What's the background of Nancy?
Well, she's had this really fascinating life because she came from a very ordinary family. When she was living in Australia, she had lots of brothers and sisters who were older than her, and her dad actually abandoned the family shortly after moving them across.
Right.
So her mum was left alone looking after all of these children. Nancy was the youngest and was very much kind of the troublemaker. It was, why can't you be like your brothers and sisters? And she didn't feel a lot of kinship with her family. And she ran away from home when she was very young. She was only a teenager, started out on her own. And she talked her way into a job as a nurse, which she was not old enough for and definitely not qualified for. And she was trying to save up money to then move on, but had a really interesting moment where her aunt, her mother's sister, sent her some money. And it's kind of a strange relationship between the two of them. They never spent much time physically together, but the aunt was like the black sheep of the older generation. She was an opera singer. She went and pursued her career in a way that would have been considered very radical at the time, very feminist. And Nancy's mother, her sister, constantly warned Nancy that she was going to turn into her aunt if she didn't mend her ways. And obviously for Nancy, that's not a warning.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, great. Fab. Yeah.
Yeah. So she ends up with this windfall from her aunt. Her aunt sent her $200, which was a significant amount of money then. And she uses it to get on a boat and go to New York on her own, still only, 18 years old. Off she goes, first to New York, then to London, where she ends up studying to be a journalist. Again, one of those spontaneous decisions. And then she gets offered a job in Paris.
So this is the early 30s then, presumably, when she goes over to...
Yeah. So the sort of late 20s, early 30s. And she ends up in this job in Paris as a correspondent, because there's a real revival of interest in European politics around that time because of the tensions that are growing. And a lot of British but also American publications are seeking additional correspondents to be living in Paris and to living in France and traveling across Europe. So she capitalizes on this moment where there's a boom in interest in news and wanting journalists with different experiences to report on it. And she talks her way into another job that she's, again, woefully underqualified for, but ends up being sent to Paris to work for Hearst Publications.
Ooh,
so she's got this kind of very humble background, and she's very much done everything herself off her own back. She wants to be somebody. She wants to travel. She wants to see Paris. And so she makes it happen for herself.
I've just had a thought, which is rare for me, Ali, but bear with me, okay? Because, I mean, let's not go, this is incredibly, not scandalous, but this is away from the norm to go all the way from, and Australia at the point is, and with the greatest respect to my Australian mates who will probably hang and draw and quarter me, but in the 30s, Australia isn't the vibrant society that we know today. You don't leave Australia. So to go all the way to New York, sin, and then go to London as a single woman of that age, and then Paris. So that's number one, how quite revolutionary that is. Two, European affairs, okay? And I'm just thinking, okay, the patriarchy, but Spanish Civil War. And you think of Hemingway is swaying backwards and forwards with a whiskey in his hand between the Hotel Florida in Madrid and the front lines. But, Martha Gellhorn, the unbelievable mold-breaking female journalist there. So it is a thing that women are starting to get positions. I suppose that's why she ends up in Paris. But Hearst as well, because, Hearst Publications, I mean, Randolph is presumably still alive and kicking at this point. So it is very much Rosebud. Citizen Kane is modelled on Hearst, by the way, listeners, in case you didn't know. So therefore, I mean, she's having to stand, you've got to be quite, quote unquote, ballsy to survive in this macho world.
Yeah, one of the things that's quite a great tragedy is that we can't read Nancy's articles that she wrote because it was practice at the time to put male editors' names on them. So we can't attribute them to Nancy anything from the archives. And, it's really sad that because her passion and her zest for life and the way she communicated with journalists, she wrote her own autobiography, and her writing style is really brilliant. So we've kind of been robbed of the opportunity to see her commentary on the time firsthand through those articles. But, sort of talking about being ballsy, the way she talked herself into that job was nothing short of extraordinary. That they were actually looking for someone with a Middle East specialty, somebody who spoke Middle Eastern languages. Yeah. And she had absolutely no clue whatsoever. But she went in and said that she could speak Egyptian. She literally could go into this interview and say, I can do this. And the interviewer said, right, well, let me test you out. And he read out from a passage of a book, and she had to transcribe it into Egyptian and then read it back to him. But what she did was she transcribed it into a form of shorthand that she'd learnt when she was studying to be a journalist at the college, but wrote it right to left so that it looked more like a Middle Eastern script. But then obviously when he said, read it back to me, she was able to do that perfectly because she had written it down in a way that was familiar to her. And he thought she could speak it, and off she went to Paris with this job.
Amazing. Well, but that just shows that because she's going to need these skills later on. Now, we don't know the war is coming, but when war breaks out, is she in Paris? Whereabouts is she? Did she get out? Did she stay? What happens?
So she's actually involved in the kind of coming time of the war when she's a journalist. She travels a lot. She has this really important experience where she goes to Vienna and she witnesses how the Nazis are treating people and the kind of fervour of a rally.
This is like 38 sort of time after the Anschluss then? Or
It's slightly before that. Right. It's still very much in the time where people aren't necessarily aware if they're outside of the immediate vicinity of just how dangerous things are becoming.
Yeah.
But she gets this first-hand account of it, and she goes on a job, and it's what I would say, in my interpretation, is kind of the inciting moment of Nancy's then career in the war, because she has this incredible opportunity to see it. And she's horrified by what she sees. But more than that, she's horrified that other people aren't doing anything. And that she feels like she has to stand up for what's happening around her. She has to stand up for what's right. And it then has a knock-on effect of how she reacts. But that's when she's living in Paris. But actually, when the outbreak of war happened, she was living in Marseille at that time. And she has a huge change of circumstances. She's working as a journalist. She's sort of partying, having this wonderful, frivolous time, at the same time as understanding the political situation in a way that's very mature and quite different for that. But then she meets a very wealthy industrialist on one of her trips to Marseille, and she ends up getting married to Henri Fioca. And when she goes to live with him, which is 1938, we've got the shadow of war on the horizon, but her life completely changes overnight. She becomes this wealthy socialite, gives up her job, moves in with Henri, and she could be in a position where she could ignore everything that's happened and everything that's happening around her. So many of the people, her peers in Marseille, in that wealthy kind of bubble that they were living in, have decided that they're not going to get involved. But that's not Nancy.
So because France falls ridiculously quickly. She doesn't get on a boat. She's got money. He's an industrialist. She's now Madame Fiore or whatever. She could go, right, I'm out of here. Or she could stay, like many did in Vichy France, and go, the Nazis, they're not so bad after all, and we are the French. It's a really interesting dynamic because South France, you talk about Marseille, Vichy, Lyon, of course, before the butcher gets there. It's an incredibly independent region, and also difficult to get around in with armored units and stuff. So, if you want to get up to mischief, it's a fabulous bit of country because it's huge and a lot of it is deserted.
Yeah, and she is just incredibly brazen in the way that she acts. She gets involved, first of all, with the black marketeers and goes around collecting supplies to help people who are less fortunate. She feels herself kind of very responsible in her position of privilege, perhaps because, unlike many of the other socialites, she came from a different place. She came from a different situation. So she understands how much privilege she currently has at the time. So she uses her position as Madame Fioca to go around to these black markets, to haggle, to buy things, and then she distributes it amongst other families and acquaintances, including people who work at Henri's factories. But she just kind of brazenly goes around and does it. She doesn't hide her identity, doesn't hide her appearance. She goes and does exactly what she would do as Madame Fioca, learns some very choice French language while she's at it.
Will this come in later when she's in the tree, when she parachutes in?
Yes. And, she just does absolutely what she wants. But her husband was quite concerned at various points about, her attracting too much attention to herself. There's a particular incident where she's walking down the street in Marseille and she starts singing Rule Britannia at the top of her voice while she's going past officers. But, she just, whether it's carelessness or brashness or almost that she kind of understood that as a woman, she could get away with things that other people couldn't. It was almost like she was invisible to them. She was just yet another wealthy woman going about her business with her posh handbag and her hair done and her makeup on. And they just didn't pay her attention in the same way that they would have perhaps scrutinised other people.
So when did she come to SOE then, or whatever? Is it when France, when the whole of France becomes under Nazi control? Is that the final straw for her? Because that is what happens, isn't it?
Yeah, well, she ends up getting involved. She's sort of initially, as I said, involved in the black market and things. And then she has another chance encounter with a man who's working for the resistance as a courier, a kind of, with the courier network, and setting up a courier network, who's actually a English soldier who was stuck in France after Dunkirk. And there's a lot of people in that situation, a lot of servicemen in that situation, and they fled south because they were trying to get to Vichy because they thought that they would be more protected than obviously an occupied territory. And they ended up in a strange situation near Marseille where they were detained because they couldn't exactly be allowed to wander around freely. But Vichy France had to maintain that sense of respectability and that they weren't treating them as prisoners of war.
Because so Vichy France is neutral. Vichy France is actually officially neutral at this point.
Technically.
Yeah.
It is sort of, and how neutral it was in practice is very much a point of debate at that time.
I was thinking their fleet maybe might have something to do with it, but anyway, it's not got to go there. Anyway, so please keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so they had to sort of keep up this appearance in a certain way.
Yeah.
And one of those things that they did is that they allowed the officers who were being detained in the nearby forts to have a relative degree of freedom. And the man that she meets is using that freedom in order to try and set up this sort of Naissance resistance movement. And Nancy is recruited to become a courier. And she moves up and down the south coast on trains, on bicycles, on foot, taking messages, taking secret information, taking even things like weapons and parts of communication devices. And she does that for a significant amount of time. And then they move not just to transporting items, but also to transporting people. So there were so many people, sort of increasing amount of servicemen and women who were stuck in France, and they needed a way to get them out and get them back to England so that they could rejoin the forces and also, to ensure that their safety. So they developed these escape lines, they were called. There's a significant a number of them throughout the country. But Nancy was very heavily involved in the Marseille escape line. And so she actually helped to transport groups of people to the foot of the Pyrenees, where guides would then come and meet them and take them over the mountains into Spain, and then out on a boat. And
let's not forget, I mean, this is incredibly dangerous, but one of the things, I suppose, because she has been so outrageously flamboyant, I suppose the Vichy, the Vichy government, until it sort of changes, I think, well, this is Madame, whatever. She's not going to be. It's hiding. Whereas if you were, a peasant girl on a bicycle, they go, well, why is so and so cycling so much these days? But with Nancy, it's like, well, she's always been, she's hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, exactly. She's hiding in plain sight. It's exactly that. And she, both her wealth and position and her gender afforded her this opportunity to do it. But of course, all good things will come to an end. And eventually the Nazis did catch on to the fact that there was a female agent who was being so instrumental in these escape lines and in, it's thousands of people that they helped, thousands of people that they got over the border. And that's no small feat, considering how dangerous it was. And that's when she becomes the top of the Gestapo's most wanted list. And they give her the code name, the White Mouse.
The White Mouse.
And Nancy was quite offended by this. She thought, white and mouse, small, insignificant. But I think it was supposed to be more of a compliment than she thought. It was actually the Gestapo's way of kind of expressing how she managed to evade them and how secretive she had been.
Is Barbie running the Gestapo in Vichy or that area of France by this point? I mean, because the resistance will there's this meeting in Lyon. All the resistance, the head of the resistance is captured. One of the major factors is trying to because the resistance isn't one group. It's the communists. I mean, it's a complete mishmash as only the French can do. And suddenly they capture the they all meet and they shouldn't have done in a doctor's surgery in Lyon, don't they? They're all they're captured. and the head of the resistance, the bright shining light is dies because of his beatings, etc., because of Barbie, etc. So is this the point that she gets out then, or when does she get out and come back?
This is around that same era, and it's around that time where we've talked a lot about the pretense that Vichy France were putting up.
Yeah,
they kind of openly have Gestapo agents on the street by this point. The policies have changed. Propaganda is openly mimicking that of Nazi Germany. So there is a change of atmosphere for people who are living in areas of Vichy France, including Marseille, and it becomes increasingly dangerous. And you've also got this kind of, they begin to actually start to dismantle some of the networks. So as you were mentioning there, and then there's also significant people within Nancy's network who end up being captured and detained. So things start to become infiltrated. There's one person in particular who is a double agent that some of the others in her group trust, and that leads to tragedy. And so Nancy is therefore a target, and that she becomes known as the White Mouse. They're not entirely sure whether the Gestapo knew it was Nancy Fiocco at that time, or whether they just suspected it was her, but they knew there was a female agent, and they knew kind of who she was in terms of her position and power at the time. So she had to get out. So she had to do what she had helped other people do. She had to follow the escape line, and she had to escape over the Pyrenees herself. What's
hubby done? Is he gone as well, presumably, if the wife's he's hot-tailed out of France?
So this is the tragedy. He stays. He decides to stay because it all happens very, very quickly. They suddenly get word that there is a 5 million franc bounty on her head, and she goes practically overnight. And he wants to stay and ensure that things in the community are handled. He's a very responsible business owner, and he wants to make sure that other people are taken care of, and his family. And so she goes, he stays, and he's going to come and join her. But actually, tragically, not long after she leaves, he is arrested by the Gestapo, and he's tortured and killed.
Because this is the thing, the speed which they move at, when it happens, I mean, you hear so many times people saying, okay, just another week or another day, we'll stay an extra night, and that's the fatal thing. Now, we've got 5 minutes, and as you can tell, I'm enjoying this immensely. So this is a turning point. Nancy goes, if she wasn't going to go complete Kill Bill, now she's got complete thing. So she heads back, presumably to London, and gets in contact with SOE. And that's, again, it's a hard ask because, again, women are supposed to be doing little things in the background. You're thinking about the way that Christina Granville gets, the Polish secret agent, she gets treated appalling by the Brits. So, having a ballsy, Maori stroke Aussie, I mean, how does she manage? Does she just talk away saying, I'm going to go back, and I will let you go the next 5 minutes, but please, can we have the parachute story and the guy and the French and the whole thing? Off you go. So how did she get back and just recap it quickly?
Yeah, so she has this very arduous journey over the Pyrenees, but does eventually get back to London. And then she just lets loose. She has a party week. She basically decides that she's had enough with everything that's happening. She's waiting for Henri. She realises as he doesn't turn up that actually things are, they are going to be different to what she assumed. And so she goes, while she's waiting in London, she realises she's going to be there for a long time. She goes and tries to get involved in the war effort. And what they ask her to do is to go and work in a kitchen. Despite the fact that she's been on the ground as a courier with the escape line, they say, go and serve some food. And to Nancy's credit, she goes and does it for a day before she, hightails it out of there. But again, luck is on her side. She has an encounter with somebody in a bar who she helped to escape by the escape line the previous year. He introduces her to the SOE, who then recruit her. But she's kind of cross about the whole thing because having had so much sort of hands-on experience, they insist that she goes to essentially spy training school, and they insist that she goes and trains there for a significant amount of time where she's itching to get sent back into the action. And this is when she then parachutes back into France because that is the way that you got in at that time. It was too dangerous to do to get back in any other way. So she has to jump out of this plane. It's this brilliant description of the fact that she's wearing what needs to be civilian clothes underneath so she can blend in immediately. Then she's got this suit on over the top, the flying suit. Then she's got the tin helmet. So she's got her hair perfectly clothed. She's got her makeup on, and then she's got this helmet on over the top and the parachute webbing and this jumpsuit. And she said she felt trussed up Chenways from Sunday because she's got 400 layers on and she's lying in the bottom of this aeroplane, incredibly airsick, can't see where she's going. Probably regretting life choices, and she's also hungover as well because she had one last hurrah in London before being.
Come on, if you're going to leap out, I mean, who doesn't leap out of an aircraft in full makeup and coiffed hair? I do all the time without having had a skin full the night before. So you've got 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. So she then gets to the landing zone. And, parachuting at that time was not for the faint-hearted. They had a static line so that you didn't have to rely on the parachute opening. It was a low altitude drop. But even so, the pilot overshoots the landing slightly and she ends up stuck in a tree, kind of on the other side of the field, stuck in this tree. And she can hear people moving around. And your first thought is going to be, are they Gestapo, are they or local French police, which have been the Milici? But luckily, a man comes around to greet her, who is in fact part of the resistance. And his line is brilliant. His line is, "I wish all French trees bore such fine fruit at this time of year." And she basically tells him to F off. And that she was married to a Frenchman, and she's like, "Don't you dare try and charm me.
Get me out of this bloody tree, mate."
Exactly, yeah.
Listen, as you can tell, we've only touched the surface because we want people going by the book, and we've gone through it. I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds to go. So, Ali, you have been absolutely brilliant. The book, but all the things about the market, what happens afterwards, it is a truly, and the main thing, mate, congratulations on the book, because, again, women's history in the Second World War seems to be, as I said at the top of the interview, it's, gals doing things, in the background. And blimey, O'Reilly, Nancy, sure as hell ain't that.
No, she is not at all. She loved her makeup, she loved her comforts, but she swore too much. She drank all the maquis under the table. They literally were like, "We've never seen a woman that size," because she was only about 5'3". She's tiny. And they just said, "We've never seen a woman that size put away that much vodka. Like, how'd she do it?" And they were incredibly impressed and kind of enamoured of her because of this skill.
Where can people find you online, Ali, if they want to get some more information and say lovely things about you?
So the book is available to buy. It's published with Pen and Sword, so you can buy from Pen and Sword. You can also buy from the bookshop, Barnes and Noble. And if you would like to get in touch with me and speak about the book, you can get in touch with me on Instagram. My Instagram is Ali_Sharman_writes. So my name. It would be lovely to continue the conversation. And she's such a wonderful person. I'm always happy to talk about her life and to talk all things writing and books as well.
Listeners, you can also order the book via our own virtual bookstore. This book is called Gestapo's Most Wanted. The interview was even better than I was looking forward to. Absolutely wonderful. Congratulations on the book. Ali Sharman, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Giles. Wonderful to speak today.